Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ProStar Holdings live corporate webinar. This is David Vidala from RBMG. ProStar is listed on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol MAPS and on the OTCQB under the symbol MAPPF. Joining us today is the company's president and CEO, Paige Tucker, who will be going through ProStar's October investor presentation. This will include an overview of current operations, recent achievements, and upcoming milestones. Today's investor presentation is located on ProStar's website. At the end of the presentation, we will open it up for questions for management to address. If you are interested in asking a question and are logged into the Zoom app or web platform, you can submit your questions to us directly in the question module. Please note, this presentation is being recorded today, Tuesday, October 19th, and will soon be made available on the company's website, prostarcorp.com. One more thing, RBMG is not a registered investment advisor or broker-dealer. For more information, please visit rbmilestone.com. And now I'll hand it off to Paige. Paige, the stage is yours.
David, thank you for that introduction, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining the presentation on ProStar. Again, my name is Paige Tucker. I am the CEO and founder of ProStar. ProStar is a world leader in the development of precision mapping solutions. When I talk about precision mapping solutions, a lot of you might be familiar with digital mobile mapping solutions such as Google Maps. Google Maps is accurate to about 1 to 3 meters, but it does a great job on getting you from point A to point B, regardless if you're looking for a hotel in an unfamiliar area, or an address of a home that you've never been to, or maybe an airport, again, in an unfamiliar city. Once you get close to your destination and you either see the address or you see the sign, you can turn the app off and it's done its job. What I mean by precision mapping solutions is that we're focused in the infrastructure industry, where we're working with large construction companies, engineering and surveying firms, government agencies, and even equipment manufacturers of GPS and surveying equipment. And in their world, everything is survey grade, which means centimeter accuracy. So we've designed a system that's mobile and cloud, presented on a SaaS model that will get you centimeter accuracy on a standard mobile device. Our flagship product, is PointMan, which again is a precision mapping solution offered on cloud and mobile platform. Before I get into my presentation, if you have not reviewed our forward-looking statements, it's available in our presentation deck that's on our website. And in addition to that, our confidential information disclosures are also in the PowerPoint presentation that's on our website, and I invite you to review them, please. So again, PointMan is our flagship product. It is a patented and commercialized solution that provides the ability to precisely capture, record, and display the precise location of critical infrastructure, both above and below ground, including buried utilities and pipelines. We have an existing marquee customer clientele list that is expanding, including Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, as well as some of the largest engineering and surveying firms in the United States. And I'm also excited about the fact that just recently, we've expanded into other market verticals, including the municipal market and also the utility market. We have a veteran management team with extensive experience in the development of software, including cloud and mobile technology platforms, as well as extensive experience in the capital markets. My background is over 25 years in the development of innovative technologies with a core focus on data management, as well as geographic information systems, which is basically a big fancy word for digital mapping. A few years ago, realizing that we had developed a platform that could be globally scalable and address a serious problem around the world, I wanted to make sure that I had a right-hand man that had experience in operating multi-billion-dollar companies with global operations. So I hired one of the top C-level recruiting firms to find a chief operating officer for me. I identified about 57 candidates, narrowed it down to 5 that I thought were the most qualified, interviewed them all personally, and finally selected Vasa Dasan. Vasa is the former chief technology officer for Sun Microsystems, which in its heyday was the largest technology company in the world. One of Vasa's accolades that I think is most impressive is he's personally responsible for migrating Wall Street to the internet. Jonathan Richards is our chief financial officer. Jonathan has managed the CFO responsibilities for many high-profile pubco companies that currently trade on the TSX as well as the TSX Venture, and again, he serves as our full-time CFO. Recently, I hired Jason Marchuk as we now move into sales and marketing mode. He serves as our Senior Vice President of Sales. He's the former application sales manager for Oracle's construction and engineering global business units. And prior to that, he worked for a company called Hexagon, which is actually one of the largest geospatial technology companies in the world. Again, our focus is critical infrastructure and all of the market sectors that either own the critical infrastructure, construct it, or manage and maintain it. And what you see in front of you is an example of all those market sectors. Somewhat unprecedented for an early stage technology company to have any number of issued patents. Definitely unprecedented for an early stage technology company to have as an extensive IP portfolio as ProStar does. We have 20 issued patents and several more that are pending. Just to lay the landscape of the industry, I like to put some stats out. There's 2.4 million miles of paved roads in the United States. And as we know from the campaigning that's coming out of the White House, that infrastructure is becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. And that includes our roads, our bridges, our highways, as well as our railway systems. It's estimated that we are going to have a $1 to $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill to address these serious issues. In addition to the roads, bridges, and highways and railway systems, about $300 billion will be earmarked for below ground infrastructure. That includes our water systems, as well as sewage systems, and also expansion of broadband. This is very important because you cannot work on the infrastructure or the below ground infrastructure without impacting one another. This image shows why. Basically, I refer to it as a spaghetti bowl of utilities and pipelines that have been haphazardly placed into the ground without any oversight or regulation over the last 100 years. And as you can see from this image, if I remove the pavement in any metropolitan area, not only in the United States or Canada, but around the world, this is what it would look like. In fact, a large majority of our utilities and pipelines were put into the ground between 60 to 100 years ago. One of the issues is that our water systems and our sewage systems in some major cities, like New York and Los Angeles, were put into the ground 100 years ago. In fact, there's 35 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines in the United States alone. And it might surprise you that 60 to 100 years ago, with no oversight or any type of regulation, there was not a concern of where these pipelines and utilities were placed in the ground. And in addition to that, they were never intended to serve the population growth that we've had over the last 50 years. 500,000 times a year, we hit those utilities and pipelines during construction activities. And when you hit a utility or pipeline, some bad things can happen. It can be major flooding in a downtown area or in a neighborhood. It could be traffic delays that last for hours. But in worst case scenarios, if you hit a petroleum pipeline, you could have dangerous gaseous substances that are leaking into our water systems, including our lakes and our rivers. Also, if you hit a high pressure gas line, there's a very high probability that you're going to have an explosion. And when you do, there's either injury to the worker, to the public, and far too often we have loss of life. And I would argue that that number is unacceptable and only increasing every year. We spend about $10 billion a year in the United States trying to identify where these utilities and pipelines are located. And yet it's estimated that we have over $30 billion worth of damages every year as a result of hitting these utilities and pipelines during construction. So whatever we're doing, it's not very effective. 60 to 100 years ago, we didn't map at all where these utilities and pipelines were going into the ground. But it might surprise you that even in the last 40 to 50 years, the way that we have mapped where utilities and pipelines are going into the ground, including today, is on paper maps. These are called as-builts. These are the original planning and design drawings on how the utilities and pipelines are intended to go into the ground. However, the way that we plan for them to go into the ground and the way they actually go into the ground are two different case scenarios, and for several reasons. There could be a large object in the way that they didn't know was there, so they have to put the pipeline or the utility around that object, or the ground conditions are simply too hard, or the right-of-way where they planned on placing the utility or pipeline is just too congested with other utilities and pipelines that have already been placed in the ground, so often they'll place it over on the other side of the road. Once the utilities or pipelines are placed into the ground, they bury them. So when the regulators come along, they can't actually see where they are. And as long as they're close enough based on the planning and design drawings, they sign off on that it's okay. That creates a problem because then these drawings become the system of record of where those utilities and pipelines are placed. So they're inaccurate by nature. In addition, the way that we locate where utilities and pipelines are is a pretty archaic and ineffective process. What we do is anytime we're going to do construction that involves digging, it's required by law that you call into a state one-call center. And what you tell the center is where you plan on doing construction activities. What they do is then take all the information that's been provided to them by the utility and pipeline companies, and as best they can, try and determine who could be impacted by the construction. Then what they do is they notify the utility and pipeline companies that they have to come out and mark where the utilities and pipelines are located. They send out what I refer to as low-level workers with very little training, very little certification to come out and determine where these pipelines and utilities are located below the ground. And what they use is what's called an electromagnetic utility and pipe locating device, which the majority of the time can locate where a utility or pipeline is located. But the problem is they put a paint mark on the ground to actually designate where that utility is. Well, number one, just human error, it's going to be off anywhere between 1 meter to maybe even 2 meters. In addition to that, I actually don't know if they located the right utility. Maybe they're mistaken a fiber optic line for an electrical line. Or I don't know if they located a utility line at all. In fact, we know that these paint marks can last up to 6 months or a year. And if they can't identify where a utility or pipeline is located, they'll just spray over the existing paint mark because they get paid based on how many paint marks they put on the ground. In fact, the companies that take on all the liability, which is the construction companies and the engineering surveying firms and the excavating companies, they don't trust these paint marks at all. What they do is they bring in these large vehicles called hydrovac trucks. And what they'll do is they'll drill a hole in the ground over top of the paint mark, and they'll suck all the dirt out through a giant vacuum system until they can actually expose and see where that utility or pipeline is. They have to do this because the risk and liability of hitting, for example, a fiber optic line, a major pipeline, or a gas line is far too expensive and risky. If they don't find where that utility line is based on this process, they'll move it over a couple feet and drill another hole in the ground, and they'll continue this process until they locate that utility or pipeline. Problem is, it damages the pavement, and it's a very onerous process, very time consuming, and very costly. But again, this is what they have to do. As you can see from this image, you can see how many utilities and pipelines you can stack beside each other and on top of each other in a very small, confined area. And this is only getting worse with each passing year. In fact, it's estimated that we're putting over 300,000 miles of just fiber optic into the ground each year. In addition, this is the onerous workflow process and business practices that are involved in capturing, recording, and sharing the data. So once they put a paint mark on the ground, or they drill a hole in the ground to identify where the utility or pipeline is located, they send out surveyors to survey the paint mark or the hole in the ground. Then they upload the information onto a PC out in the field. That data has to be reviewed and qualified, and then it's exported back to the office, where it's imported into either a CAD, computer-aided design system of record, or GIS, Geographic Information System, where the data manager qualifies that data and then finally sends it out into the field, where that information can be used by the field crews to make more informed business decisions. The problem is, at best, that process takes 2 days. On average, it takes 2 weeks. And in fact, it can take up to 2 months. Now, with all the modern technology we have today, that is streamlining the workflow processes and business practices in other industries and creating automation, you would think that this industry would also adopt modern technology. However, it's a laggard, and it's ranked number 50 in the adoption of modern technologies. That means it's also ripe for disruption. That's why we introduced PointMan. It's a simple cloud and mobile app. You can download the application onto any standard mobile device, including a smartphone or a tablet that you can buy at any Verizon store or Best Buy. And we address and streamline all of those onerous workflow practices and business practices as well. So the question becomes, how do we do it? Well, we take the electromagnetic utility and pipe locate device, and we Bluetooth it to any standard mobile device that's running our PointMan software. Then we pair it through Bluetooth to a precision GPS receiver. So this is not the receiver, obviously, that's embedded in your mobile device, which will provide 1 to 3 meter accuracy. This is a precision receiver that will provide centimeter accuracy. And then as the information is being captured and recorded on the mobile device, it then goes up to our cloud running on Amazon, where we run it through our algorithms, all of our post-processing practices, and then we make that information readily available in a matter of seconds to whoever needs it, including in the field or out in the office. Here you can see what it looks like while the data is being collected. So in the operator's left hand is the pipe and utility locate device. As he's locating where the utility or pipeline is located, we're digitally recording the precise location onto the mobile device. And then we're capturing very pertinent metadata that provides the quality and confidence level on how that data was collected, including information from the electromagnetic locate device, as well as from the precision GPS receiver. So as you can see in that little white box where it says pedigree, we're capturing important information from both devices. For example, what type of locator is it? In this case, it's an RD8100. What's the depth of the utility or the pipeline? What's the currency and frequency, which provides the unique identification of what type of utility that is? What type of receiver is it? In this case, it's a Trimble R10. If you scroll down, you can see where it says vertical precision, that the accuracy is 1.3 centimeters. How do we know that? Because in this case, we've captured 9 satellites. We can tell you what constellation those satellites are in, and we're capturing what's called the NEMA string, which is the accuracy data provided from each one of those satellites that we then run through our algorithms and our post-processing to determine the accuracy. In addition to that, we're also a data aggregation platform. So we can stream data in from any system of record, including the utility company or pipeline company's CAD or GIS system, out onto the mobile device. So they can see where their records currently indicate where their utility or pipeline is buried in comparison to where it's actually being located. At a click of a button, you can measure the distance discrepancy. And all of this can be viewed in real time back in the office. So if they had crews out there, for example, they had 10 different resources that are collecting data out on 10 different projects, they can actually view the data being collected in real time back in the office. And then they can review the data that we're capturing of the actual location of where the utility or pipeline is buried, and then see the discrepancy. Then at a click of a button, they can consume the data that we provide into their system of record so that they can rectify their records with the actual location of where the utility or pipeline is buried. So obviously this is of huge value to the utility and pipeline companies to adopt our solution, but also to promote that their service providers also adopt our solution as well. So our process is pretty simple. Capture the data, goes to the cloud, and in a matter of seconds, it's available to whoever needs that information, either out in the field or in the office. So almost 3 years ago, when we realized that we had developed something of significant value, the next step was to go out and find big companies that we could determine would be adopters and major influencers in the market. One of the companies I contacted is a company called Kiewit. They're the largest infrastructure construction company in North America in terms of building roads, bridges, highways, dams, and railway systems. And I presented what we had developed to them. In their exact words, they said, if you have what it appears you have the holy grail of the construction industry. And I said, well, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to sign a service level agreement with us so that there's contractual obligations. And I'd like you to pay us. And I'd like you to test our solution for 1 year on a project. And they agreed to do that. And they said that they're going to put us on the I-70 expansion through Denver, which is the busiest section of I-70, which I've been told is the busiest interstate in the United States. And they told us this will be one of the most complex projects that they've ever been engaged in terms of trying to identify where utilities and pipelines are buried. It's a $2 billion project. It's going to take up to 5 years. And they're actually going to be relocating sections of the interstate as well as subdivisions. Well, after 1 year, we were able to quantify the impact and value we provided on that project. And we were able to identify that we reduced utility strikes by up to 97%, which is a significant savings measured in millions and millions and millions of dollars just on the damages that we reduced when you hit a utility or pipeline, not to mention the downtime of the work crews, had in fact they hit those utilities. So then what Kiewit said is, in addition to infrastructure, we'd like to place this into other divisions and test it, including light rail, water, and power, which we've been testing now for well over a year. Now they're starting to place us in multiple projects, not only in the United States, but up in Canada. In fact, we're on the Ottawa Light Rail project, as well as the Toronto Light Rail project. We have since signed a master services agreement with Kiewit, and they're now starting to push us out, as I mentioned, onto multiple projects in both the United States and Canada. couple of years ago, once we had landed Kiewit, I went over to CDOT and said, hey, we've signed Kiewit on I-70. Would you like to also test our software solution? And they agreed to. And I said, we'd like you to sign a service level agreement and pay us, which they agreed to the terms. I'm going to fast forward 2 years later. On January 14th of this year, the state of Colorado mandated into law that every utility company, pipeline company, construction company, municipality, and engineering and surveying firm, anyone that either owns, constructs, or manages and maintains utilities and pipelines that are on a state right-of-way are required by law to use ProStar's PointMan to identify the precise location of those utilities and pipelines and then provide that information back to the state. Not only does that provide a tremendous amount of credibility that a state agency would mandate a software, it's also provided visibility around the world because there's other states that have the same issue, provinces in Canada and countries throughout the world that would like to have a standardized method and a centralized database to manage where pipelines and utilities are located. As a result of the mandate, what has happened is we've had several large firms, including engineering firms and construction companies, that were forced to use our solution in the state of Colorado. Once they use it, though, they realize immediately the significant value it could provide to their operations nationally. So, for example, KCI signed up. They're one of the largest engineering surveying firms in the United States. Kramer is now a client of ProStar. They're another large infrastructure construction company that does billion-dollar projects for the state, including in Colorado, but also other states nationally. WSP, another large engineering and surveying firm, recently adopted our software as well. So we're starting to see that acceptance in the market, in particularly a disruptive technology where construction companies and engineering and surveying firms did not believe that we could provide centimeter accuracy on a standard mobile device, do all the calculations in the cloud, and provide that information in a matter of seconds. But as I mentioned, now we're starting to see that adoption in the market. What's happened in the last 30 days is also very exciting. We're starting to see adoption in multiple market verticals where we haven't even been focusing, targeting, or marketing. For example, last month we got a call from New Hampton. They're a small municipality located in Iowa. And when we asked them, how did you get a hold of us? They said, we found you on the internet, which I was very excited about. And then I asked, what type of issue are you currently having? And they said, well, all of our assets today are managed on paper maps. Of course, we're very familiar with that. And they're in filing cabinets. They said that everything from manhole covers, fire hydrants, road signs, but more importantly, our water and sewer systems are on those paper maps, and we would like to move to a digital system. We said, great. So we demoed our system and we signed them up. When they asked how much we were going to be, we said, well, how many users do you have? And they said 2. We said, we're under $5,000 a year. You could hear a pin drop in the room from the silence because our competitor is Esri, ESRI. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the municipal space. Esri is going to run you anywhere between about $150,000 to $250,000 a year. So in many ways, it's unaffordable to these smaller municipalities. In addition, Esri requires a 4-year college education just to know how to operate their solution. We got New Hampton up and running in a matter of minutes. We trained their staff how to operate our system in less than 2 hours. And as I mentioned, to start them out, we're under $5,000 a year. That's why I say we are disruptive. And yet we're running over 80% profit margin. What I'm excited about the municipal market is that there's over 38,000 municipalities in the United States with a population under 20,000. I picked that number because the vast majority of them will not have a digital asset management system. They'll still be on paper maps. So you could imagine if we even got 10% of that total addressable market. And on average, if they were just paying us $10,000 a year, that's $38 million in reoccurring revenue every year. I think we could actually penetrate and get a higher percentage of that total addressable market, because as I mentioned, we don't have competition, not based on what we can provide and the price point, and that's just in the United States. About a week later, we got a call from another small municipality, the township of Aberdeen, located in New Jersey. Asked them how they found us. They said they found you on the internet. Asked them what issue and what concern did they have. And they said the state just recently mandated a law that every municipality has to report to the state where their water systems are located and do so digitally. And it's enforced by the Department of Environmental Protection. We said, we can address that for you, showed them our solution. They asked how much we were. I think they started out with 3 users, which means we're under $7,500, which they couldn't believe. We signed them up. Now we're doing a case study. We already put a press release out. And the Department of Environmental Protection is going to help us send the message to the other municipalities, also in New Jersey, that don't have a digital mapping system, so they can comply to that new mandate. So as you can see, we're starting to get traction in the municipal market, which I'm very excited about, because the way our system is designed, it will work anywhere in the world, in any language, and in any currency. So it's literally infinitely globally scalable. And there's a lot of towns, not only and cities in the United States and in Canada, that don't have a digital mapping system, but also throughout the world. We also recently signed T2 Engineering. It's one of Canada's largest engineering and surveying firms, but they also have over 20 offices and locations here in the United States. But I'm excited about that because now we're expanding into Canada. In fact, I'm testing with one of the largest data collection companies in Australia that also has operations in the UK. So hopefully I'll be able to announce over the next 30 days that we're expanding into other countries, including Australia and the UK. And we also recently signed Zayo, which is one of the largest fiber optic companies in North America, with operations in over 400 cities, including in the UK. So now we've expanded into the municipal market. We're also expanding into the utility market, starting with the fiber optic company. So I'm pretty excited about the ramp up that we've experienced just in the last few months, and in particular in the last 30 days. Last year, we were contacted by Trimble, the largest geospatial technology company in the world, and also the largest equipment manufacturer of GPS equipment and also surveying equipment. They heard what we were doing with companies like Kiewit and government agencies like Colorado Department of Transportation. We visited with them, demonstrated what we're capable of doing. In fact, their comments were, we've tried to do what you guys are doing, and we've bought companies trying to do what you're doing, and we're unable to do it. We don't know how you're doing it, but you're obviously doing it. We'd like to partner with you, and we are going to allow you the highest level of integration into our GPS receivers than any other company in the world. Well, number one, that provides tremendous credibility and visibility, but more importantly, a vast majority of the construction companies, engineering, surveying firms, municipalities around the world use Trimble equipment. So what that means is they can adopt our solution without reinvesting in any new hardware requirements, and we can use the technology that they've currently invested in, which again is the Trimble equipment. In fact, major manufacturers of GPS equipment around the world have sent us their equipment that we can integrate into, as well as the vast majority of the utility and pipe locating manufacturers. Why do they send us their equipment? It's pretty simple. We significantly enhance the performance of their equipment and also the value that they can provide to their clients. In fact, we put a press release out today that Bad Elf is actually bundling our ProStar PointMan software with each sale of their hardware equipment, which of course creates tremendous visibility to their customers around the world. The way that we sell and market our solution is 3 different platforms. Number one, you can download it for free on the Apple Store and Google Play, and it works anywhere in the world, including the ability to go out and actually identify, record, and display the location of buried utilities and pipelines. However, you're restricted to the accuracy of the GPS chip that's embedded in the device, which again is only 1 to 3 meters. But it allows people to become acclimated and familiar with our solution, and it's free. If you want to get down to centimeter accuracy, we only charge $295 a year. This will allow you to pair to a precision GPS receiver and get centimeter accuracy, and again, works anywhere in the world. But you're limited to the storage that's available remotely on the device, and we're capturing a lot of data. Ideally, what we want to do is move them up to the enterprise mobile and cloud platform that will run an entire company's operations as far as workflow management, seeing where your crews are. It also integrates into your system of record, also integrates into the Internet of Things. This is only $2,495 per app. And we just introduced this new platform in March. And this is why we're starting to see the ramp up in our sales. And for 2 reasons. Previous to introducing this new platform, our enterprise platform started out at about $150,000 a year and went up to over $300,000. That's what Kiewit and CDOT had implemented. What this allows us to do is, number one, shorten down the sales cycle, because they can test it and buy 1 app for $2,495. And that's what these companies are doing. But in addition to that, we can address what I think is as much as 80% of the market in terms of construction companies, engineering, surveying companies, excavating companies, even small municipalities that cannot afford an enterprise digital asset management system. Now they can. And again, our system works anywhere in the world. These are my revenue projections. I'm projecting that we're going to do approximately $1.4 million. This is in Canadian dollars. And that next year we'll do about 4.2 million. I think we're going to see a significant ramp up in revenue going into next year, just based on the amount of credibility and visibility that we have into the market, the introduction of our new platform that is so much more affordable. In addition to that, you can see that we're moving into other market sectors, and that also our strategic partners, including equipment manufacturers, are now starting to promote our product and our services as well. In addition to that, what I'm projecting is the sale of just under 10,000 apps over a 5-year period. Not clients, just 10,000 apps. For example, Kiewit could easily require 2,500 to 3,000 apps. That's just one client, but I'm actually not including them in my projections because I don't want to rely on one customer. This is based on organic sales, selling to clients that need between 10 to 20 apps. To give you an idea of how modest I think our projections are, just in the state of Colorado, we have 1,000 construction companies and engineering surveying firms that operate here. We have over 300 utility and pipeline companies, and we have several hundred municipalities. So with that mandate, I could potentially over 5 years achieve these numbers in the state of Colorado, but I'm not making that claim. What I'm focusing on right now is 50 states in the United States, and I plan on selling 10,000 apps over a 5-year period. The other thing I'm really excited about is that for the first time, because we've been operating now as a public company for 9 months, we went public on January 11th of this year, I have a really firm grip on what our operational expenses are, including our filing costs, legal, accounting, even our 401k contributions. And I know that we need to sell 1,250 apps to attain cash flow positive status, which of course is a major milestone for any company. And I'm giving us enough time that we can sell 1,250 apps, including all the way through 2022. Now, if some major events happen and we bring on some big clients that require a lot of apps, there's a possibility I could attain that milestone earlier in the year. But again, I'm giving ourselves all of 2022. As you can see on my cap chart, we currently have 91 million shares that are outstanding, 117 million when we're fully diluted. We have about $13 million worth of warrants that are built in on what I call a secondary finance with a weighted average price of 59 cents. Now, there's just a couple things I want to say before I close here. Number one, we went public on January 11th, and my opening share price was 40 cents. Today, I'm trading at 40 cents. I think part of it is obviously we're caught up in the vacuum of a depressed market, particularly the micro-cap market. In addition to that, COVID has affected many of our clients because these big construction projects have not kicked off. They've been delayed, which could be a good sign because what'll happen is they might get carried into 2022, which means we'll have that money spent from 2021 and 2022, plus the budget's also kicking in 2022. So we could see a significant ramp up in business, and obviously we're positioned very well. In addition to that, we're going to have a $1 to $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill that I think will be passed at some point because both parties in the House have agreed to it. It's just a matter of getting it pushed because it impacts our economy and also the safety of the public and the environment. And again, I think we're poised very well to be able to benefit from that infrastructure bill. In addition to that, we recently listed on the OTCQB, and I'm really starting to focus on the US capital markets. The reason for that is we're a US company, our clients are US based, and this is a major US problem. And last but not least, we had a production company in here 4 weeks ago that was shooting a special on ProStar and this major problem and how our solution addresses it. And it's going to be broadcasted on PBS. I'm hoping it'll be released in November. It'll be broadcasted into 84 million homes and over 50 countries. And I like to say, with no pun intended, I think that's going to put ProStar on the map. I'd like to thank you for the time that you allocated to me to learn a little bit more about ProStar. And if you have any questions, I will field those questions and provide answers as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. That was great. If you're interested in asking a question and are logged into the Zoom app or web platform, you can submit your question to us directly in the question module below. Now, Paige, we have a few preliminary questions that we received prior to the webinar. First, how do you feel the U.S. infrastructure bill will impact ProStar?
Oddly enough, it's going to have a serious positive impact, but I'm going to tell you why for a couple different reasons. So first of all, that money will be allocated from the federal level down to the state level, down to the Department of Transportation, each agency in each state. And then they'll start to look at various areas where they need to significantly repair or replace, infrastructure in their state, including, as I mentioned, the roads, bridges, railway systems, and also sewer systems and water systems, expansion of broadband. So companies like the big infrastructure companies like Kiewit will see a lot of work as a result of that. It will also spark a lot of work with the engineering and surveying firms that are involved in what's called subsurface utility engineering. So obviously we're positioned well because we've proven that we have a solution that can seriously mitigate and reduce the risks associated with the construction of infrastructure, both above and below ground. And also we have state agencies that endorse our solution. And in addition to that, we work with the equipment manufacturers that need to be involved, including the GPS equipment manufacturers and the utility and pipe locating manufacturers. So I think we're positioned very well. But what I'd like to point out is that when you take a look at water systems and you take a look at our sewage systems, that's the infrastructure that's buried the deepest in the ground, in some cases between 15 to 50 feet. And yet the majority of utilities and pipelines that are buried in the ground are buried between about 1 to 10 feet. So it's also going to create a serious issue and open up a can of worms that I don't think the government realizes they're getting themselves into, which means you better identify where all of the utilities and pipes are located that are above our water and sewage systems. And I only know of one that works on any standard mobile device that will give you centimeter accuracy. And the fact, as I mentioned, we've just partnered with the largest equipment manufacturers, and we work with the largest companies that are involved in the construction and repair and replacement of infrastructure. So again, I think we're poised quite well to benefit from that infrastructure bill.
Great. How secure is the ProStar platform with regard to data security?
That's a great question. Might surprise you that utility and pipeline companies are more sensitive about their data than the Department of Defense or Wall Street. But what we did when we built this most modern technology platform is to make sure that natively we can address security issues. So number one, data sovereignty is a major issue around the world, meaning that countries don't want data leaving the country. And what we can address is the data sovereignty issue to make sure that if we're working with a client in Australia or in Denmark, we can assure them that that data will reside within their country. Number two, we're also SOC 2 compliant, and we get audited every year. That's the highest level of data security that you can attain. And again, we built the system to support that level of data security.
Great. How well does the software work in an area of low or no connectivity?
Again, that's a great question. Yeah. A lot of times we're working with customers that might either be working in a remote area, meaning they don't have any connectivity, or you could even be working in a downtown corridor. And I'm sure we've all experienced this, where all of a sudden we don't have connectivity. And it might only be intermittently, it might be for 1 second, or it could be for 1 minute. So what we built into the system is actually what we refer to as geospatial intelligence. So number one, if you know you're going to go to a remote area and you might not have connectivity, say for a day or maybe even a week, you can download all the data that's required onto the device. You can go do all your data collection. And then when you have connectivity, it'll sync back up to the cloud, and all the information would obviously upload onto the cloud and then be available to whoever needs it. But more importantly, and this happens more frequently, if you're working in an area and you have interruption that again lasts for maybe 10 seconds or a minute, the system and the solution is smart enough to cache the data based on the project area that you're working, so that you can continue to work even though you have interruption, and you may not even know that you have interruption. And then as soon as it syncs and there's connectivity, then the data uploads back up to the cloud. So we're able to address that issue as well.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question. What markets or geographies do you see as a main focus or opportunity for ProStar moving forward?
So I have a methodology both in development and in marketing, and I call it crawl, walk, run. And we implement what I call the 80-20 rule. So number one, you want to be very focused, methodical, and systematic in your approach. So today we are a US company, as I mentioned, and our clients are US based. And this is a major US problem that I think other countries and jurisdictions are also following the model to see what we do in the United States. Now, this is a big, expansive market. In fact, when it comes to infrastructure and the industry that we're involved in, I would argue it's the largest market in the world. Once we tackle this market and we prove how effective we can be, then the goal is to move out to other markets globally throughout the world. And in fact, as I mentioned, we just redeveloped our platform so that it is globally scalable and can support infinitely any number of users or customers around the world. So the goal is to be successful in the United States and then slowly move out into other countries. But as you're seeing, what's happened is we're already starting to get business in Canada. As I mentioned, we have companies that are testing our solution in Australia. So the goal is that to support any level of demand that we incur, regardless if it's United States, Canada, or throughout the world.
Great. Well, thank you, Paige, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar recording will soon be made available on ProStar's website. If you have any additional questions that have not been addressed on this webinar, please feel free to email us at prostar@rbmilestone.com. Again, that's prostar@rbmilestone.com. Thanks again, and you are now free to disconnect.